Okay guys, so we've just had our first frost, so that means it's time to dig up dahlias. So the easiest way to do that is with a pitchfork. And when you're digging them up, you want to make sure that you're aiming the pitchfork far enough away from the center of the plant. So look at this one as an example. So you want to make sure you're about, I'd say almost a foot away from the center of the plant, just to make sure that you're not piercing any of the tubers. If you do end up cutting through a tuber, you'll have to throw it out. It won't work. It'll be no good, and it'll just end up molding. So when you're digging it up, just be careful. You want to dig around in there too and make sure that you haven't left anything behind. So you might think that this would be a tuber that you could salvage and save. But the problem is it doesn't have an eye at the end. So these tubers are just good for compost. When you're picking out tubers that have broken off, you can only salvage them if the ends were connected to the main stem where an eye was forming, so swollen part. So that would be the area where new growth would come out of. If it snapped off without that, then this would just end up rotting. And you don't want to include this in the tubers that you're going to be saving, because that rot or that mold could end up spreading to the good tubers. So this one was quite happy. I planted this as probably 2 or 3 small tubers, and you can see how it's multiplied. I mean, there's easily, I'd say 20 here. Oh, there's some damage here, so you can see I got it here with a pitchfork. So this one we'll have to carefully dissect out and throw out. Here's a great example. So here's a tuber that's snapped off, but you can see it does have an eye, so swollen part here where it's growing out of. So this will make a new plant for next year, so we're going to save this one. So the first thing you do before you dig these up is look at your weather forecast, and what you want to do is wait for the first frost. So the day before the first frost, if there's still any flowers remaining, cut them off, take them inside to enjoy, and then the next day after the frost has hit, that's when you want to dig up your dahlia tubers. So you are working with a pretty short window. I would say probably within a few days of the first frost to maybe a week or 2 max is when you should be digging them up, because you don't want those tubers to freeze. Surface level frost is okay. That's going to kill off the foliage and signal to the plant that it's time to go into hibernation. But once the temperatures dip below that and the frost starts entering into the first couple of layers of soil, that's when the tubers will die. So for our zone here, zone 5B, we do have to dig it up in the fall and store them to replant again in the spring. Of course, if you don't do that, they'll die. You can buy new ones again next year, but this is a great way of making more plants and also saving the ones you have. So what you want to do here for this part is we're going to be cutting off the top stems, and then after that you want to rinse off the tubers really well. The reason for rinsing off the dirt is so that you can have a good look at each tuber individually and make sure that there's no damage or signs of disease or any dead tubers. The reason why we're cutting off the stems is so that we're stopping the nutrition from going into the foliage. We want these tubers now to start hibernating and go dormant, so there's no reason for them to continue feeding the flowers and the foliage. Okay, so we've rinsed off all of the tubers. They're nice and clean, and now we have a chance to inspect them for damage. So this one, as an example, has a couple that are damaged. So right here, this is a damaged tuber, so we'll have to remove that. There we go. And you'd think that you might be able to save this little one, but it's also snapped over here. So this part is supposed to be nice and taut and rigid. If it's snapped like that, it's no good. And here's another one, this big one here. See that damage? This one has to come off. So I have these paper lunch bags. They're great for storing dahlias. You just label it, stick the tuber in there after it's been drying for at least 24 hours. Some people also turn them upside down like this to dry. The theory is that there might be moisture still in the stems here, and you want that moisture to drain out. And once they're dry, stick them in the paper bags and stick them in a dark basement corner. And check on them about once a month just to make sure that they're not drying out too much. Dahlias do need a tiny little bit of moisture. Otherwise the tubers will completely dry out and become desiccated. So you do want to just check on them about once a month, and if need be, give them a little bit of a spray of water, just very light misting. This one is beautiful, but I don't have any red in my garden, so it doesn't really quite fit here. But this will be fantastic in my mom's garden. So we're gonna dig this one up and give it to her. So of course, if you want to keep track of what varieties you have, it's a good idea to just put a tag on the stem before you cut the flowers off. so it's easier to identify. And then after you've gone through and removed all the tubers that are damaged or showing signs of disease, and after you've obviously cleaned it all off, then you can label individual tubers as well. I'm not going to bother labeling most of mine just because a lot of the varieties I'm not sure of what they are. I either received it as a gift or it's just been too many years where I've lost track. But this one I will label just because this is one that we'll be giving to my mom. So I know as gardeners we're always looking for ways to label our plants that will withstand some weather. And what I found is these plastic tags with a UV resistant marker is the way to go. It lasts a lot longer than, let's say, just writing on a popsicle stick with a regular pen. This way you can reuse your plant tags as well. So I'm just going to call this Mom. Red Dahlia. Okay guys, I'm going to show you how to divide your dahlia tubers. So we're going to start with this guy. This clump is huge. It grew incredibly well this year, and we can get quite a few plants out of this. So I'm just turning it around to see, trying to find the best spot to cut. I think I'm going to start right here in the center. And you might lose a few tubers in this process, but that's okay, because the idea is that you'll still end up with a lot of plants. There we go. I'm going to trim these roots as well, because it's just creating a big tangled mess. We'll cut it in half again. And I'll cut this one more time. There we go. So this is a nice clump of tubers that we can plant next year. So this one I'll be throwing out because it doesn't have the parts that it needs to grow. This one broke off without an eye or swollen part. So you can see the swollen parts are where they attach to the stem, and that's where growth will come out of for next year. So if a tuber breaks off and it doesn't have this long part and the swollen round part attached to a stem, it's not going to grow.